states we looked at, and think it's a great starting point with respect to the minimum thresholds. Reporting requirements. So these are very similar to what we had for cultivators and processors. A key difference is going to be the submission of the certificate of analysis for each batch that is tested to be submitted to the department electronically. It also establishes what shall, may, and shall not be included on that certificate. And it allows labs to report quantitative analyses that are beyond the minimum requirements, as long as they are able to obtain a standard for comparison. Waste disposal, 4-2-06. This will be very similar to processors. If you remember, cultivators are, they're allowed to compost. We removed that for processors, and this rule is very consistent with the waste disposal procedures for processors. It requires the disposal of non-marijuana waste also be in compliance with any applicable state and federal laws. Security. This mirrors the security requirements for cultivators and processors. We have the physical location, those security requirements, and then we broke it down into the technology requirements, if you remember, for the alarm systems, video cameras, etc. I think a key change that was made to all of these rules from a security standpoint is that the state will have to have 24-hour access to live camera feeds, but that the equipment only need allow for motion-activated recording capabilities. And the reason for that change is a lot of times parts of the facility, there will not be activity. And so if there is activity, that would trigger the recording. And so if we needed that recording, we could get to it. But this will help make the costs a little more manageable, especially when there isn't a need for recordings in a room where nobody is present. So we think that helps and will ultimately help keep costs lower and will be passed on to the patient at a lower cost, hopefully. It also still requires that they notify the department and law enforcement of any breaches in security. So you'll see the same language there for all the other rule sets that Commerce drafted. Prohibited activity, this is a little lengthier of a list, and a lot of the things that we added just go towards the importance of having a sample collection methodology that's not deviated from. So again, making sure that we have a representative sample, making sure that these labs are not doing anything to tweak or manipulate the results in the certificate of analysis. These things are very important. We've heard of it going on in other states, and we wanted to expressly acknowledge these activities as a way for the department to revoke a license if that type of activity is going on in the state. A lot of the other prohibited acts you'll see are consistent, and that's doing any type of cultivation, processing, or manufacturing of medical marijuana, consuming on the premises. One particular thing that we will not allow is sharing a facility with a cultivator, processor, or dispensary, and that's consistent with the ownership restrictions that they have, and why we keep these separate, because it is so important that we get accurate, non-tampered with results when these batches are being tested. Records and reporting, this goes towards more of all of the reporting requirements that we had for the cultivators and processors. So if you'll recall, the transportation logs, destruction need to be submitted, security records. What's a little more cumbersome here is the employee matters. Again, we'll have that scientific director who will go forth and make sure that all of the policies and procedures are being followed. With training documentation, they'll hold trainings, they'll be accountable for all of that. And so we want to see records around the employee matters. Financial records are the same, and the same as theft and loss records and reporting. Enforcement, 4-3-01, very similar if not identical to cultivators and processors. This will also allow for joint inspections with other state agencies if necessary based on the circumstances for the department. And again, this is identical to the enforcement section that was previously reviewed for cultivators, and the enforcement section that was there for processors. And last, miscellaneous provisions. You'll recall in the cultivator rules, we had the general fee schedule. Testing lab, the application fee is $2,000. The certificate of operation is awarded, that's an $18,000 fee, and an annual renewal fee of $20,000. With that, Chair, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Anything else from the Director? Any comments to add? Okay. All right, so we'll kind of revert to our regular format of taking a walk through the rules, stopping section by section as the committee may have comments or questions. So we'll go back to the top for 101, walking our way through the number of provisional licenses. Questions? Yes.
I just point of clarification for 101. How many labs do we, when I read it, it sounds like it's going to be at a university for the first year?
That's part of the uncodified language in House Bill 523. Yeah, it required and it tied it to, if you look in B, when the department begins accepting applications for licensure,
yes,
that period has to be tested by university labs. That's correct.
So a university lab is going to be in the business of it, or help me understand that better.
Yeah, so if you look at how the rule's structured, we have flexibility. We've spoken with different universities regarding the testing of medical marijuana for the type of analysis we need performed. We're continuing to have those conversations. And so labs that are interested in doing that would fall under Provision A.
Okay.
But because we're moving forward with the program and we have to be fully implemented by September 8th of 18,
yes,
Division B covers private laboratories.
Okay.
And that will then dictate the process we follow for those private labs.
Then a follow-up question that I have written in the margin is, what about a public lab that is not tied to an organism, not tied to a university, like a health department lab?
You know, I have to get you the exact language that was in the uncodified portion of the bill. I know there was, is it just public university? Just public university, but I could look up the language and get that for you from the uncodified portion.
So they would not be?
It sounds like they would not be, but I'll direct you to that language.
So we should be comforted thus far that there are identified universities who are either vying for or capable and willing to step up and fill this role. So it's not like the program would be held up because there was no university taker to fill this role.
So we've had conversations with those universities. I'm not comfortable in saying that they're willing to step up.
Sure.
We continue to have those conversations, but what we are comfortable with is that we have a plan of attack for making sure that when plant material is available, there will be testing labs that will be able to test these plant materials, these products, and get them to the dispensaries.
It's only our public universities is how I read this. Is that right? Like Ohio State and...
Public university, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. Other things on 01? All right, we'll move on to the provisional license standard or the rule 1-02. Okay. 1-03, the application review, and that we've seen rules that look like this already, I think, in other elements, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
In case there's other questions, specifically, I think we took a look at this for cultivators and processors. Okay.
And as you review, the key change will be in the operations plan, and things specific to the testing
To labs.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. 104, provisional licensing. 105. Financial responsibility for the licensee. 106, certificate of operations. Okay. 107, transfer of ownership or location. All right. 108, renewals. And 109, winding down or going out of business.
Just have a question on 109.
Yes.
You know, in Ohio, when we, I'll use coal mine stripping, you know, there was always a law that said you had to have so much money in escrow that if this business didn't go right, you could reclaim that. When you're talking about winding down, is that what you're talking about? And what assurances do you have that Company A, is that the bonding?
So to your point, so with the winding down, the purpose of the escrow account or the surety bond is to ensure that if any of the reasons identified in that rule, which are if they commit prohibited activities listed under the rule, otherwise they're not in compliance with 3796, we are able to assess fines, and we want to make sure that they have an ability to pay those fines.
Counsel, I appreciate that, but a lot of times when companies are bankrupt, it's difficult to get money from them.
Right.
Is there money in escrow so that bonding, that is whatever, so if they are winding down, they're defunct, whatever, and you have to clean that mess up, is there money available?
Other than the escrow and surety bond, no.
Taxpayers of Ohio, thank you. Because that would probably fall to us.
I'm on the end of that. The sheriffs have to go in and clean it up.
Right.
I thought I'd share that.
I appreciate it.
Other thoughts there in 109? Okay. We're moving into the operations section 2, which is 2-01, general provisions on operations. So I have a question there. So walk us through the chart is helpful to me. I'm interested in the timing. Is this a test and hold? Is this a test and they can release and it's only, how is the product going to be moving through, or do we have to wait for testing to clear before it can roll on? What's that look like? Okay.
And that's the benefit of having the inventory tracking system. So once a sample is collected from a batch or a lot, that would be held at the cultivator or processor. What we're allowing in Ohio, which is different in other states, and we heard a lot of pushback on this, is the labs can transport the samples back to the lab, and then they will conduct that analysis. Once the analysis is conducted, they confirm with the department through the inventory tracking system that all of the tests have passed. Then that batch or lot will be released for sale to a dispensary.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Other questions on 201? 202, proficiency testing and certification.
I was just curious about the choice of calendar year for the certification and accreditation.
I'm sorry, which language are you referring to there? Oh, within
yeah, the choice of a calendar year instead of, the number of days. My reading of this is it's a December 31st. Is this to allow for more time when it's needed?
You raise a good point. I think the key there was 2 years from the date where they would pass their, or obtain their provisional license. So we can clarify that to make sure that's more clear. Ideally, we'd like to keep them on that 2-year schedule and not provide more time unless they want to take advantage of the petition, which would buy them more time. So it's a good call. We'll look at that language and make sure it's clear. 2 years from, just 2 years from that date when the provisional license is awarded.
Thoughts? 202. Okay, moving on. 203, sample procurements. Yes.
So this may have already been touched, and I wasn't paying close enough attention. So is the concept that an agent from the lab will be coming to the facility? It will be the one who's choosing that random sample themselves and then transporting it back.
That is correct.
I think some of it gets back to, for me, a little bit related to the batch concept. So that would mean that once the plant material was then processed, trimmed, then that's 15 pounds, right? But if we were talking about other plant material, lower grade flour and other trimmings and the like, that doesn't have to be tested itself, right? That's tested based on the flow chart after it would be manufactured. So it wouldn't have to be tested before it was created or extracted. So there's no 2 levels of testing that needs to be tested prior to its extraction.
On the assumption that would all be sent to a process of
Yes.
extraction, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Sample? 204, analysis requirements. Question numbers, make sure you know right in here. the pass-fail methodology, does that fall under this rule?
It does,
Okay.
yes. You'll find
So-
it under,
Just generally speaking, there's lots, so the assumption I'm making is it's a pass all standards. You might pass 4 or 5, you have to pass them all to get that product out into distribution.
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and the only exception to that, Chair, is the test where they can resend it and extract it.
Yeah.
And then that could then have an all-pass test. So
Okay.
that's the only exception to that.
And again, just to flush that out for my purposes, so if you had a batch of flour that tested for some sort of mold or something that then could be refined and removed, if it was extracted and they're extracted, it could be repurposed then at that point, so it wouldn't necessarily have to be destroyed.
That's right. Yep.
Much like we ran into in the study analysis for 90-day, I'm assuming that the standards that have been set here are all readily available, or are we creating any new standards for the state of Ohio as part of this process?
The standards are already available. We reference those standards, but then we also
Sweet dreams are made.